Welcome back to Advanced Nuclear, the official podcast of UCAN Power. I'm your host, Dominique Cooper. Today's episode is centered on one core idea from UCAN Power. There's a report that they released that talks about the Department of War and its critical role and how there's a major opportunity to lead the development, demonstration, and deployment of advanced nuclear technologies to meet national security requirements. And this report, it makes another point very clearly. If DOW succeeds, it won't just benefit national security, it will also benefit America's commercial nuclear industry as the nation faces exploding demand for electricity. This report lays out 34 tangible recommendations for the Department of War to take action over the next year to support national objectives. It also notes that Congress has provided DOW guidance and directives across successive legislative cycles to establish oversight for nuclear power programs. To break this down in plain English, and to talk through what action should look like, we're interviewing Lucian Niemeyer, the co-founder of the United Coalition for Advanced Nuclear.
Welcome to Advanced Nuclear, the official podcast of UCAN Power, where leading experts, innovators, and policymakers explore the latest developments shaping the future of nuclear energy.
He's been on the show, so he's no stranger. Welcome to Advanced Nuclear, Lucian.
I appreciate it very much.
So for anyone who didn't catch your first appearance on Advanced Nuclear, do you mind introducing yourself or reintroducing yourself? Who are you and, what you focus on?
No worries. First of all, congratulations to you, Dominique. You've raised this to another level. We have now 30 episodes, and I'm hoping anybody who's listening to this can go back to the UCAN Power website, ucanpower.org, to see both the report and some amazing prior interviews we have done. I was the first one with a guy named Jim Howe way back when, and I think we had 5 downloads, mainly from my son, who I forced to, my mom who just wanted to, and then, believe it or not, we had an array of federal prison inmates around the country that seemed interested in nuclear power. So that was the first download. But I am thrilled to hear that some of your more recent speakers have been up around 700, 800, 600 downloads. That's a true testament to the quality of the programming you've all done since your auspicious beginning. So I am here today to bring that listenership back down to the low teens. So that's that's my intent here, so we can build back up. So I do appreciate the invite. We have a serious topic to talk about. But I do believe it's great to be back on. Of course, I got interviewed by Jim Howe. Dominique, you are a lot different than Jim. Jim was a co-author for the report, but I much prefer spending some time with you and going through the report. So I appreciate the opportunity.
My pleasure, Lucian. It's always fun having a conversation with you.
And you wanted my background, right? You wanted my background. I forgot about that, right?
Yes. Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm at this point in my life, I've got more formers than Liz Taylor has exes. So I'm a former White House official. So I worked at Office Management Budget, where I actually met my 2 co-founders of this nonprofit, Mike Duffy, who's now serving as the Undersecretary of War for Acquisition and Sustainment, Brian McCormick, who left our organization to go up to the National Security Council. Now he's working for Senator Hagerty. And I don't know if you remember, the chairman of our board was a guy named Ted Garish, who's now obviously serving as back in the Department of Energy. So my background is Office Management and Budget. Before that, I was in the Pentagon, where I was the Assistant Secretary of Defense for all energy installations and environmental programs, to include nuclear power. Back in 2017, when I got into the department, we really started looking at nuclear power as a way to provide resilient power for military bases. Before that, 11 years on the United States Senate Armed Services Committee, where I had the defense energy portfolio working for Senator John Warner and John McCain for 11 years. So I've been focused on national security energy. And even before that, I served in the Air Force as a civil engineering officer where we were responsible for building power systems in expeditionary locations, military bases. So I've been working military power, national security power since, 23 years old, as soon as I got out of college. So it's I'm bringing some expertise, some experience, but more recently an understanding of how national policy works. And we applied this with our nonprofit, United Coalition for Advanced Nuclear Power, which we started in 2022. And we had expertise in our little nonprofit to say, hey, we're going to write an executive order. Hey, we're going to write this. We're going to write this report. So we feel like we've had some shoots, Bob. We've had some umbras, and we said we're going to go do this. So I'm pretty proud of this most recent report, which is the work that Jim and I did and others to really focus on Department of War as a first mover. And look, we're working right now within the Department of War across all the services with leaders to not only promote what we put in the report, but some of their own initiatives. So bringing a lot of that background into a conversation today.
I mean, let's get into it. I won't delay any longer. Let's get into it. So I want to start with why now?
Yeah,
why
it's a critical time. So, my compliment to, there's some other organizations that did some work for the White House, led by the Nuclear Industrial Council, USNIC, United States Nuclear Industrial Council. They did a report for the White House Energy and Dominance Council, National Energy Dominance Council, and they covered a lot of ground. They had some fantastic recommendations, and this report went out last year, beginning of the administration. When we read it, we were like, wait a minute, there's some national security priorities that we need to include. So that's when we went to work, and we coordinated with with the other associations and said, hey, we just want to focus on the Department of War. And there are things that are going on within the department we'll talk about in a minute, which are key and essential to what you mentioned. How can national security funding, how can national security programs ultimately translate into commercial deployment? So we had this clearly in our minds. So we went to work. It took us about 6 months. We vetted it with some of the key leaders in the administration. And we got it out in December. Again, anybody who's interested in reading it, it's at UCANpower.org. It was a time. We're at a pretty amazing time in our nation's history. You had the President of the United States put out 4 executive orders in May of 2025. They're a good start. They put out some pretty aggressive goals for not just the Department of Defense or now the Department of War, but also our nation, to actually have deployable reactors in place, have others under construction. So we feel, okay, that those are good goals. Here are some things we need to do to get there. And that's what you see listed in those recommendations that we put out.
I want to talk about funding. Is it too early to get into the funding, right? So, Lucian, who's going to pay for this? I think in the white paper, there's a mention that the government's clearly not going to write a blank check, right? It calls for investment from the private sector to carry a significant share of reactor build-outs. Can you share in practical terms, like what's the financing model looks like? Like, how is it going to actually work?
Well, I think there's 2 models right now that's within the department. So first of all, there's been a significant amount of private sector capital put into, particularly Generation 4 reactor development. And so one thing we have to be clear on the call here, on the podcast, is that Generation 3, Generation 3.5, those are AP1000s. Those are some of the more mature reactors, but they're also larger. Westinghouse AP1000s, 1.1 gig, and then you've got others that are out there. Congratulations to TerraPower for getting their NRC construction license. They're running about 385. So those are, and there's the size, because a lot of people just say SMRs, when in reality there's an advanced reactor and then there's the different sizes. For instance, one of the programs in the Department of War is Janus, which was announced in October of 25. They're led by Dr. Jeff Waxman, who we should have on this podcast at some point. They're looking at 20 meg and below reactors, and they've selected 9 sites, and I'll get to that in a minute. But there's also other programs looking for larger, and in some cases more mature reactor designs. And so based on the size, I think presents a different financial model to your question. So, for instance, Janus, I think if you were to talk to the Department of War and particularly the Department of Army, they would say, yeah, we plan to put a very healthy funding line in the 2027 President's budget. Now, we are recording this in March with a release date in April. As of today, we have not seen what that budget number is going to be, but it needs to be pretty healthy. It needs to be in the high hundreds of millions of dollars to be able to get the developers who are participating in the Janus program to want to take the next step. They've invested hundreds of millions of dollars of their own money. Now they want to see where can we work with the Department of War to use DOW money to ultimately get deployed on into a military base. So in that case, it's government funding. And I'm skeptical. I'm not. We'll see what comes out. I think we need $3 to $4 billion over the next 5 years, which is called the FIDIP. For those of you who are budget terms for the Department of War, we need to have billions of dollars committed to this to really give a good signal of demand for the private sector. We'll see if we can do that. On the other hand, you've got amazing progress made through private sector investment, not just in developing a reactor, but deploying it. I was, if I would have told you, or you would have told me, Dom, that 3 years ago that you had a hyperscaler that would pay for the opening of 3 Mile Island Reactor 1, I'd have been like, good luck.
Right. Yeah. Like what are you drinking?
Exactly.
Are you dreaming?
Right. So you've got significant investments now going way beyond $100 million or $50 million for seed funding to work for. You have private sector that's willing not just to pay for development but deployment, and so I believe that there's a market for that for Department of War, and that's what I've been pushing personally. Is that why not put an AP1000 on a military base that has a fresh water source? Why not look at legacy reactors that are much larger that we can get started on right away with construction that potentially can be paid for by the private sector? And it may not necessarily need to connect to the grid. You can ultimately put off-takers on that site, particularly if you're going to build a 200 meg array of reactors or 400 meg or 500 meg. You can actually have off-takers where those electrons don't need to leave the base. All that power can be consumed on installation, and you're taking an installation off the grid, put it on the same power plant with the support of the local utility. I don't want to exclude them. But now you're looking at a way for the private sector to pay for that because they also want that resilient power for other off-takers who need that resilient power. And I'm looking squarely in the eye of the hyperscalers who signed a pledge last week with the White House that they would invest in behind-the-meter generation. So if you go, again, we're recording this in the first week in March. You had the President of the United States in the White House with hyperscalers and utility companies, and they're pledging they're going to build behind-the-meter generation. That's a great pledge. Where are you going to do it? Why not include Department of War sites and Department of Energy sites? This isn't an original idea. The Department of Energy has already got 4 solicitations out for large-scale development of power plants and data centers at Idaho National Lab, Paducah, Kentucky, Savannah River, South Carolina, and Oak Ridge, Tennessee. So there's 2 agencies, not just Department of War, but also the Department of Energy that are looking at alternate financing mechanisms so the federal government does not carry the full burden of having to deploy these reactors for national security purposes.
Can we back up for just a second, right? You talked about the Janus program and other programs, and it's what I've heard in my government careers, like making sense of the alphabet soup, right? In the report, you talk about potentially aligning all these programs under a unified program of record. Could you speak to how fragmented the current picture is and what's at stake if those programs stay siloed rather than working together?
Yeah, so you had the president put out an executive order that gave the Department of Army executive oversight over the reactor development, but all I've seen come out of the Department of Army so far is Janus, which is a 20 meg and below reactor. We're facing a national power crisis in this country, Dom, and I've talked about this before, where we're running out of power. As a country, we're looking to we need to add 100 gig over the next 7 years. just to meet the AI demand, the demand caused by artificial intelligence. In addition to the increased risk on our grid from nation states and physical attacks or cyber attacks. Volt Typhoon is still very much on my mind, the Chinese malware that was going after our power systems. And then you've got the risk of kinetic attack, and then we have just deteriorating infrastructure. So we have a range of issues, and we're not building transmission lines fast enough. We're not building new generation fast enough. So we're looking at a wide range of needs for this country. And I just don't think a series of 20 meg reactors is ultimately, and we spend billions on that, is going to solve our problem. We need reactors of all sizes to be brought in across the country. And I got to tell you, in some cases, Dom, building them on public lands can be a lot easier than building them on private land. And it's not because the communities are opposed. I'm involved with an association. We have a 50th anniversary summit in Washington, D.C. in the middle of May. If anybody wants to find out, it's Association of Defense Communities. And I'm putting together a nuclear power panel to talk to defense-related communities around the country. So a lot of major bases in the country have these, mayors and city managers and, county councils. And they all come together, and they're all saying, we want nuclear power. And so there's not like there's a fear. It's just, okay, where do we put them that we can accelerate construction? From my perspective, the best place to put them is going to be on military bases. Now, Janus, you mentioned Janus. They've selected 9 locations around the country. That came out in November. They're in Georgia, they're in Tennessee, they're in Alabama, they're in Kentucky, they're in Washington State. These bases are online. You can find out about them. And I got to tell you, the communities, they're excited. All 9 of them. I've heard the Alabama delegations are already in Washington, D.C. put a reactor right there at Redstone. You've got, the folks at Fort Wainwright. Now, Fort Wainwright is a unique solution because right now they're operating a coal plant. And if you look at the Fairbanks area, and I was just up there about 6 months ago, we have a huge strategic problem with Fairbanks, Dominique. I'm not sure if you've studied that area. Where we have one transmission line, it's called Rail Belt, that runs out of Anchorage to the Fairbanks area. That is why the Air Force picked Eielson Air Force Base for a location for a nuclear reactor, because that area is so strategically important to our nation's security, and yet we have a fragile distribution and power generation system up there. So Fort Wainwright is, I think, a perfect location. Now, I would love to see possibly the Air Force and the Army work together. So maybe we have one reactor that may be larger than 10 or 15 meg, so we can actually power all 4 bases up there. Because we have a gigantic radar at Clare Air Force Station that's providing security for our whole country. We have 42 ground-based interceptors at Fort Greely, and then we've got Eielson, which is a very important base for us for F-35s, as well as a strategic airlift and a tanker base. And then we've got Fort Wainwright, which we have a brigade there, a huge training area. That location needs more than just 20 meg. So that's kind of where I think we need to be bringing these programs together and bring the Air Force and Army together. Where can we, under one program office, say, hey, let's address the strategic imperative of the Fairbanks area with more than just a reactor at Eielson and a reactor at Wainwright. So these are the types of things I think we need to be a little bit more aligned on within the Department of War. And that's why one of the recommendations is, hey, let's look at, where is our most strategic asset? The number one recommendation we make in the report is, let's start looking at what we call DCAs and TCAs, defense critical assets and task critical assets, which are where the most important places that we need to have reliable power. And let's focus on, can we get a reactor up and running in those locations? That's what the Secretary of Defense asked me to do in 2017. He asked me, hey, there are certain strategically important locations. I want a reactor there. Now, I wasn't successful. Obviously, 9 years later, we're still struggling with that. But he got me down the path of looking at what's the most critical assets that need reliable power off the grid. Let's focus on that. That can only be made by somebody at a very high level Department of War and not necessarily by a military service. So that's kind of the coordination I think we should be focusing on, is where do we actually deploy that next reactor.
So it's interesting that you say that, because I was going to ask about, how does it look to take a microreactor to one of those sites that you mentioned, and I'm curious as to why it hasn't happened already, aside from some of the congressional advocacy.
Yeah, I think it's just hard. I know that the Air Force really took the step forward. I got to give a shout out to the Air Force team, starting with Mark Correll, who's now retired, and now Nancy Balkus. They've been spending a lot of time up in Alaska trying to get their developer underway, and they had protests. DLA Energy managed the solicitation, and they were stalled out in protest for years from other companies who felt like they should have had an opportunity as well. So it has been a series of fits and starts with the Air Force. I think they're still struggling with what size reactor to put on Eielson. I think the vendor would like to put a larger reactor. And look, they got started in 2018, 17. So it does take a while. Obviously, as a country, we can't afford that long time period. Again, we can't. So that's why this administration, this president, is really putting everything on an accelerated pace, and those unbelievably tight timelines are in executive order. But we got to move, and so I'm appreciative that in the last year we've seen a lot more action, including the announcement in October of Janus. Now the goal is how fast can we get those to underway, and that's what we're working on right now.
How close are we to actually deploying power forward into contested environments?
Yeah, so I'd say the goal is 2028. That was written, actually 27 was written in statute. I'm not sure we're going to make that. 28, we might, but it'll be a test reactor. Really what John asks is, when can we actually commercially deploy? I don't see a time, although we have pretty aggressive timelines. We have to have 10 AP 1000 equivalents under construction by 2030. I believe a few of those should be on DOW sites. But we're not looking at actually adding significant power to the grid. I say significant, like a gig or above, before 2030.
Wow.
That's just my personal opinion. That's not the official position of the Department of War. So,
thank you for that disclaimer. So the report makes a case for nuclear, not just on the ground, but also in space, which is a very interesting aspect of nuclear deployment for me, considering my background. Yeah. Right. So the report talks about utilization in space from a life sustainment perspective, but then also from a thermal propulsion perspective. Now, I gotta say, it does feel a bit different when we speak about base resilience. Why does UCAN Power see space as part of this same nuclear deployment mandate, and how urgent is the competition with China and Russia in this particular domain?
So, and by the way, my hat's off to Jim Howe, who's truly an expert on this, and he wrote most of that section. There's a long history of both DARPA and NASA banding together, on various programs that have come and gone, and I think there's been a lot of money spent, and we still don't have a really good program as far as how can you use a reactor either for one of three things: habitation in orbit, or habitation on the moon or Mars, and then ultimately using nuclear reactors to propel to get forward off the Earth. I think in the beginning of this administration, they canceled a couple programs that I thought were moving along at a decent pace, but they're still trying to reconstitute that. So I think there is still a way forward for DARPA, which, as you know, is the Department of War of Activity, and to continue their work on what can be done to assist working with NASA in collaboration with NASA to address all three of those. So, we don't necessarily want to lose the decades of funding, significant funding that have been put into this, and the promise of where we can support military space as well as NASA space and lunar exploration. This president's committed to both a lunar mission as well as a Mars mission. I'm not sure you can do that without nuclear power. So we just have some our recommendations are just practical. Let's see where we can pick up the lessons learned from previous programs. move forward and continue to have a DARPA line along with what's going on with NASA working together. The goal here is cross-agency collaboration to address that. So I would say they're kind of prodding recommendations and not you have to go do this, but more, hey, we can't lose the research and development we've done to date.
So last question before we go into the lightning round. If you're okay with doing that, it's
Sure.
going to be fun.
I got some other things I want to talk about. But.
Oh, okay. All right. So let me ask you this then. If you were advising the Department of War tomorrow, what are the first 3 moves from this report you would execute immediately?
All right. So that's a fantastic question, and you hit me kind of a sideball on that. We had not discussed that question before this.
Lucian, you got it. You got it.
So the first thing I would do is we talked about it. We have to take the great work that's going on in the Army by executive order. They're the lead, but we had to take a look at is Janus the only program we wanted coming out of that, and there has to be strong leadership at the Office of Secretary of War, within the Office of Acquisition and Sustainment, and R&E, on the Undersecretary for R&E, on creating a overall program of record for not just what we're doing with Janus, not what we're doing with the Air Force, and not what the Navy's doing with larger reactors, but let's not forget Pele. Project Pele is a very mature program of record. We actually have started construction on the test reactor at Idaho National Lab. That's a deployable reactor, and we cannot lose sight that when we're in a forward contingency location, we're going to lose power. If you look what's going on, the first thing that happened in Caracas when we went in to get a bad actor there is the power went out. So we have to look at resilient power generation that is not reliant on a fuel supply that can be interdicted. So we have to look at, actually, there are 4 programs if you really think about it. There's Janus, there's AMP, which is kind of the Air Force is invested in AMP in addition to what they're doing at Eielson. And then you have Pele, and then you have what the Navy's doing. All 4 of those have to be brought in with a common focus and a common effort somewhere in the Office of Secretary of War. Okay, that's number 1. Number 2 is you've got significant programs underway. I'll mention one, Sentinel. We're looking at spending up to $200 billion on the modernization of our land-based cruise missile silos at 3 locations. Believe it or not, right now they rely on commercial power, and their backup program of record right now is diesel generators. You got to be kidding me. or a land-based triad for which we're going to be, it's an absolute imperative for our strategic deterrence. We're going to rely on diesel-powered backup generators, assuming we can get diesel fuel to the silos. So I would, if I were making recommendations to right now, I would say stop. Where are we doing major programs like Golden Dome? We've got Golden Dome's going to rely on a lot of remote sites. We have an entire section of our report committed to what should be the next steps for remote site deployment. So you look at what Golden Dome is going to require for edge compute, for edge radar, for edge interceptors. They need to be on a reliable power source. Same with Sentinel. And then where AI is going to go, I'm a big believer that the Department of War and Department of Energy has already put out requirements for the Genesis mission. Please, those listening, look that up. It's going to be a federal AI platform being developed by the Department of Energy. Department of War is going to want a piece of that. So they're going to want to have edge data centers that are trusted, reliable. They're going to want to have behind-the-meter power, whether it be nuclear, gas, whatever, but nuclear is the most reliable. And they're going to want to be able to access that hundreds of megs of data compute, regardless of what's the condition of the national grid. So I would, as my second recommendation, I'd be looking at where we have specific requirements that we need reliable power, going back to my discussion about defense critical assets, tactical assets. And by golly, put them on reliable power ASAP. So that would be my number 2. My number 3 is we got to invite the private sector onto our military bases to start building plants. There's no way around that. We have to say, we're open, give us an easement. We'll give you an easement, not a lease, because I don't want to have to tear this stuff down after 30 years or when the Department of Defense says they need it for their next, child development center. And once I build these, I'm sorry, bowling alley. I should have said bowling alley. Child development
Bowling
centers are very
alley,
important.
yes, Lucian.
They're very important activities. Bowling alley. Although I don't want to offend the bowlers, so I'll come up with something else. Skeet range. No, I can't do that either. Anyway, I don't want us to have to tear down a facility because all of a sudden we want to put something there like a golf course. So let's do that.
Or an archery range.
Archery, oh my gosh, I don't want to do archery ranges. I know you'll kill me. But people don't realize on the call here that you are a nationally competing archer. Is that true?
Yeah. Yes. Don't go look me up. Please don't. Please don't.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. I started about a year ago. So.
Yeah. So bottom line here is that the Department of War says, we'll give you an easement for 500 acres. Build us a power plant and run it for us. And we'll take that power. We'll put other off-takers there. But let's get going. And I'm not talking 20 meg. I'm talking 200 meg, 500 meg, a gig. We have to use public lands to build large-scale generation to meet the needs of this country, meet the needs of our nation's security. And we have to start yesterday. Not tomorrow, start yesterday. So that is, if I were in the Department of War, and who knows, I may end up back in there in a year or two, those are going to be the issues that I'm going to drive home every day. That this country needs resilient and reliable power. We don't necessarily need renewable power as much as we need resilient and reliable power. And from my perspective, current and future nuclear reactors can meet that bill.
So, Lucian, could you highlight anything we may have missed that should be highlighted in the report?
I don't want to give it all away because that means you won't read the report. So I definitely would like folks who are listening into this to go into some of the details. I think there's a big discussion on whether you build a reactor on a military installation. Can you send those electrons off the base? Currently, the policy is yes, you can build a reactor. You can operate it on a military base, and there's a history of this. The first part of the report goes into the history of nuclear power development that was led by the Department of Defense back in the 60s. And we built a series of test reactors. Believe it or not, we built one right up the way from you in Fort Belvoir, Virginia. Bet you didn't know that there was a nuclear reactor there at one point.
No.
There are some other locations around the country. So the Department of Defense has a history of not only building them, but licensing them before the NRC came into being. So the report does talk about the need to update the Atomic Energy Act to allow, if the Department of War or the Department of Energy wants to build and license a reactor, they have the ability to do that. The problem is that if you're going to build a gig reactor, you're going to want to at some point send those electrons into the local community. And that's where you need an NRC license. Now, I will say there's been an amazing set of accomplishments and activity within the Nuclear Regulatory Commission just in the last year to streamline their processes and to go from would be years down to 20 months or 2 years. We got to tell you, Dominique, that's still too long. I believe in this age of digital technologies, and you and I have talked about this in other forums, about digital twins and how we can model and simulate millions of simulations in a matter of hours, that we should be able to get the NRC design permit process or design license down to a matter of weeks, not years or months. So I think there's something to be said, and we do talk a little bit about using digital technologies to accelerate the testing of them, and to also to accelerate the siting of where's the best location to put a reactor. So those are some of the things that are in the report that I think we really do need to invest time in. I'm thrilled that the Department of Energy announced the Prometheus project about 2 weeks ago. Folks, look up online, Prometheus. And that is harnessing the ability of AI at the national labs to accelerate the digital twinning of reactors, the digital twinning of the processes in order to be able to model and simulate variations of designs and really to accelerate the entire process for getting a construction permit for a nuclear reactor. I don't ever want to undermine the primary safety responsibility of the NRC. I think that is what makes our reactors different from anybody in the world. The Chinese or the Russians, you brought them up earlier, is that we design and build safe reactors that have an exemplary record, and we just want to continue that. But we can do it with modern technologies that makes it go quicker. So that's kind of some of the things we also talk about in the report is where we can use technology. But the goal in the end, Dominique, is speed, speed, speed. We cannot fall back as a country in our race for more power or more AI. We can't stop. We have to go faster, and it's going to need more power. So you'll see written throughout the report, how fast can we go? How fast the Department of War can push things.
I echo what you said for sure. As someone who likes to run fast, right? Let's make sure that we have the proper advocacy and support in play to not lose the momentum, but if anything, to add more fuel to the fire so that we can continue running faster. So I know this was not a part of the original questioning when we prepped, but I like to, if I can, take it to the front door of an American citizen that's not necessarily keeping up with energy. Why should my grandmother, why should my niece or nephew, why should that teenager, that college student be excited about everything that's happening in nuclear?
All right. So the first thing that we're going to have to tell our family and our neighbors and everybody is that nuclear power is not what is depicted on The Simpsons. It's not a plant on the hill with green ooze that's going all the way through Springfield. And look, I hate to say this, that's where a lot of folks get their, or they watch Netflix about Chernobyl or 3 Mile Island or Fukushima. These are incidences that were significant, but you have thousands of engineers that are national labs and in private companies who have learned from those experiences. That you don't put a backup power source below sea level, like is what happened at Fukushima when the tsunami swamped the backup power. That you don't mess around like what the Russians did, with Chernobyl, with doing little exercises and creating a huge problem. And you have to be careful about your equipment, which is exactly what happened with a valve malfunction in Reactor 2 through Mile Island. We've learned from all these. So we have now modern reactors that have benefited from 60 years of improvements. So a lot of times when you hear about folks, well, we're going to build another Chernobyl. No, we're not. We don't build aircraft today that were designed in the 1950s. I mean, we've updated our safety. Same with cars. So we have modern reactors that have more stable fuels and different ways to fuel a reactor. We have more stable cooling. And we have other engineering enhancements that a lot of communities around the country are saying, you know what? These are safe. They're smaller. They're on less footprints. They don't take as much water. And they are, for lack of a better word, and that's, again, my wording, not anybody else's, they're meltdown proof. Because the fuel will isolate itself if it has any kind of instability. So we have to educate that we're looking at a new form of baseload power generation, and that's the key. Reactors are on 24/7, 365. They don't care if the sun's shining. They don't care if the wind's blowing. They don't care if there's a storm a hailstorm that knocks out all the solar panels. They run. Once they start running, they run. Now, they also cost a lot, and the most recent deployment, large-scale deployment in this country, was 2 AP1000s down in Georgia, and they cost a lot more than they were supposed to because we hadn't built them in 30 years, so there was no supply chain. So now that we're building reactors again, across the board, you'll see those costs come down. They're still pretty high because they're first of a kind, but you want to get to fourth of a kind, the sixth one, the seventh one, the eighth one. You'll see the costs come down. And now for ratepayers in Georgia, their rates are coming down because now they're seeing a much cheaper power source being put out by nuclear power over the next 60 years, 50 years. These things have a long design life. They're not like solar or wind that needs to be replaced every 20 years. So you see ultimately a very stable baseload power source. That's why the country of Germany said the biggest mistake they've made in energy policy in the last 10 years is they closed their nuclear power plants. They never should have done that because they provide stable baseload power, which is what our country needs. So, I think we need to make that case to the neighbor, to your mom, and we'll get on a call with her. We can talk to her tomorrow, and say, here's what our country's engineers have done and scientists and to make this a safer form. Now, At some point, the same scientists are going to move to hydrogen, and we'll be able to solve all our world's problems with fusion. But right now, fission is a mature technology that will give us that baseload stability until fusion finally finds its way.
Thank you for that. Thank you. I love it. So I want to transition into the lightning round, if you're okay with that.
Sure thing. Let's go.
All right, 60 seconds. Don't overthink it. Give me an answer. All right, you ready? Let's go. What's the single biggest reason bases still aren't energy resilient today?
Because it's an over-reliance of the commercial grid. It's easy, and it's really difficult to try to come off that commercial source, and it requires a significant amount of investments that bases just don't have the money for.
Biggest bottleneck: fuel, contracting, licensing, or workforce.
Fuel's a huge problem in this country. We're spending billions of dollars to try to enrich uranium and ultimately refine it, fabricate it, and have it ready for nuclear reactors. We're behind on that. People may not realize we've been buying a lot of fuel for our legacy reactors. We still have 94 reactors in operation, large-scale legacy reactors. We're buying fuel from Russia. So we have to get off that foreign source. So fuel is a big issue. And then ultimately, we've got certain parts of a reactor that are still made overseas. We need to onshore that capability. So I would say I'd wrap everything you just said into supply chain risk is still a big issue for us.
Right. The report, the UCAN report that we just discussed for the last 30 minutes.
The one that everybody should read?
Yes, the one that everyone should read. What's one recommendation in that report that you think is highly underrated in today's time?
I go back to what I said earlier, inviting private sector capital to build reactors on military bases. Not necessarily make it a DoD program, DoW program of record, but actually saying, hey, we'll give you acreage. Can you build us an AP1000, or can you build us, whatever, a GE Hitachi or a TerraPower and Atrium? Just build it for us on a military base, and we'll work out the details. But we can't pay for it. It has to be private sector funding. That's the one idea. This administration at the White House level is pushing it. We need to see folks in the Department of War saying, yep, let's go do this.
Agree. So one thing you want skeptics to read in this report before they judge the idea?
That reactors are safe. There's too many, the Union of Concerned Scientists. I mean, my God, they've been talking for 60 years. It's just a group of scientists that don't ever want to see anything nuclear anywhere in the world. They're still being quoted in every article, every magazine saying, reactors are not safe. That's just wrong. It's wrong. It's 60 years old. So we need to have an understanding of modern technology, modern processes that ultimately have done a lot to make reactors very convenient, compatible in communities. So we have to get that across.
All right, last lightning round question. What does success look like by 2028 in this report's world?
That's easy. We have operating reactors in military bases, one way or another, either under construction or in the case of smaller ones, we actually have them up and operating. So that's the president's demand to the Department of War to have them in place by 2028, or at least under construction. I think the exact date was September 30th, 2028. So I think that's a great goal. We should be pushing for that, but we should be doing more too. So.
Oh my gosh! So I get fired up every time I talk to you. Especially about the things that are happening in the nuclear space. So thank you so much. Before we close out, I want to offer an opportunity to you to do closing remarks.
Yeah. So one thing I want to do, and I want to make a recommendation to you.
Okay.
Is this will be you and I will be the 30th episode for this podcast. It is gaining a lot of credibility and popularity in the industry. You need to find a sponsor. In other words, I believe there are companies out there that wouldn't mind putting their moniker under your name and saying sponsored by, I don't know, Rolls-Royce. Or
let's do it.
Sponsored by this company or that company. And I believe that this podcast has become so popular that you can, I think, there'll be folks who would want to to be able to offer a 30-second spot for what they're working on. And I think in order for you to grow, because I think that'd be great for you and the production team, and because this is a great outlet, this is a great opportunity to source information that we need to go ahead and start asking ourselves, okay, where can we get some support from industry to be able to continue this great set of lineup of speakers, myself excluded, but everybody else you've had up to this point has been fantastic. But just to be able to continue the quality of discussion and dialogue. So that would be my one recommendation.
Oh, I love that. I get a chance. I'm honored to do this, as you know. And
you're a volunteer. You're doing this because
yes,
you just love doing it.
I do. And as I love to learn. I was literally just talking to a friend about this before our session, and I learned something new every single time I interview a podcast guest. It's the thing that I look forward to doing, because I know that I'm going to either gain more clarity around something that was maybe unclear in my experience as a nuclear engineer working in the power industry, or I'm literally going to be smarter about something that I had no idea that was happening, even from an advocacy perspective. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
Well, hang a minute here. Before we close out, I've got a lightning round question for you. I heard it's rattling around industry that you are leading a unique workforce initiative to inspire young people all the way down to 8th grade to want to be what you are, a nuclear engineer. So I'm going to ask a lightning question in 1 minute or less. How's that coming along?
So we actually had the opportunity to pitch at an amazing event, Nuclear Makes It Happen, at NEI. And let me just say, it was electric in the room. Building Education for Energy is our nonprofit organization that's centered on education and engagement. It was shocking to get verification that I'd say 95% of the people in the room were not introduced to energy. No one walked up to them when they were in middle school, even in high school, to share with them that there were opportunities in the energy domain. So we're getting after that, and we're excited about getting after that. So if you guys are interested, those listeners out there, if you know someone that knows someone that wants to join our national campaign, please reach out to myself.
I think it's an incredible opportunity, particularly if you get industry funding, to be able to send workshop kits to a kid in 8th grade and say, okay, go win your local science fair contest by showing how a reactor works.
Yes.
And inspire these young kids. We're not talking college graduates. There's a lot of scholarships offered by other associations for college graduates to be a nuclear engineer. I want to inspire that, and I know you want to too, that youngster at 8th and 9th grade to want to say, I want to invest my time and energy and maybe be a nuclear welder or a nuclear electrician or a nuclear, not just an engineer, but a technician. And it's to me that is what's needed in this country. That the path is not always to be a nuclear engineer. And though you've worked hard to be a nuclear engineer, there's other paths that if you care about the future of our nation, of keeping people alive, which is what we need for electricity, there is a lot of ways to do that. So I love what you're doing, getting to that young kid and saying, hey, you should be thinking about energy. So I just wanted to. I heard. I didn't know. I'm glad it's been validated, but I just wanted to make sure that you had a chance to talk a little bit about yourself.
Oh, thank you so much. Oh my gosh. I would say we have to do this again, but of course we're going to do this again.
You got a lot better people that you're going to want to talk to during the next time.
Well, Lucian, thank you so much. There are a ton of takeaways, but the thing that I want to highlight is that this report doesn't just ask for vibes, if I could use that language. It lays out a concrete path for the Department of War to lead advanced nuclear deployment, strengthen supply chains, and make energy resilience real at scale. So if you're in policy or industry, or you're a student or a general listener, I recommend that you track these programs, figure out how to take action, figure out how to partner, because the future nuclear workforce will be built around real deployment, not theory. I am Dominique Cooper. This is Advanced Nuclear, UCAN Power's official podcast. See you next time.
Thanks for joining us on Advanced Nuclear, powered by UCAN Power. If this episode brought clarity to the future of American energy, share it with someone shaping policy or industry. I'm Dominique Cooper. This is the moment. This is the movement. See you on the next episode.